What's up, everybody? Nick Whalen here from RotoWire. As many of you know, myself and our NBA editor, Alex Barutha, every week we drop a video giving you some waiver wire ads. Well, we're going the other way with this one. These are some players to consider dropping if you need to make room on your fantasy basketball rosters. We'll give you 5 names to think about, and we'll start at the top with Donte DiVincenzo of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Still over 50% rostered in Yahoo leagues. I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. We are well beyond the, it's just a slow start. He's in a new situation in Minnesota narrative. He's played 25 games. We're almost a third of the way into the season, and Donte DiVincenzo is still averaging 8 points, 3 assists, 3 boards. He's shooting just 35% from the field, 32% from 3. He scored in single digits in 8 of his last 9 games. And maybe more concerning yet is that the splash games have just not been there whatsoever. This is not the Donte DiVincenzo that we saw over the second half of last season in New York. I mean, he scored 15 or fewer points in 24 of 25 games so far this season. His highest point total of the year is 16 points, for crying out loud. The minutes have been down lately. He's averaging just 22 minutes per game over his last 10. He ranks well outside the top 200 in 8-cat leagues over the last month. I want it to happen as much as anybody. I drafted a ton of Donte DiVincenzo. It's getting to the point where I'm just not a believer in there being a turnaround. I'm ready to drop Donte DiVincenzo. Next up on the list, another guard. We're going to the Eastern Conference here. Terry Rozier, who remains about 65% rostered in Yahoo leagues. And this is another player that I really wish was not on this list, but he deserves it, unfortunately. This season has been an abject disaster for Rozier from a fantasy perspective, and particularly over the last month when he ranks outside the top 200 in 8-category leagues. He's coming off the bench every night for Miami. The minutes have been down. He's not giving you steals. He's not giving you many threes. The usage rate, when you look into that, it's plummeted under 20% for the year. He was at 24% after the trade last season, 28% as a member of the Hornets prior to arriving in Miami. Throughout most of his career, I mean, he's been a mid-20s% guy when we're talking about the usage rate. So we've seen a significant decline already this year. Over his last 10 games, Rozier is averaging just 10 points, 3.5 boards, 2.5 assists, only 4 total steals in that span. You know, he's shooting it reasonably well from 3, about 38%, but he's not really taking enough for that to matter. I will say the saving grace here is that if the Miami Heat do trade Jimmy Butler, you know, maybe that could open something up for Rozier to step into a larger role, but, you know, conceivably they'd be bringing back some bodies in that deal. So probably a wash overall, especially in shallower formats. I'm ready to be done with Terry Rozier. All right, next up on the list, we'll keep this one quick. It's pretty straightforward. Buddy Heild of the Golden State Warriors. And I will say, if you're in a category league and you really need 3-pointers, you know, that's what you're after with Buddy Heild. So you don't need to drop him in that situation, but overall, I mean, he's averaging more than 1 fewer 3-pointer made per game over the last month compared to the first month of the season. Got off to a really hot start, had a bunch of, 5, 6, 7 3-pointer games. Those have not been there nearly as frequently over the last several weeks. He ranks outside the top 90 in 8-cat leagues over the last 30 days. And again, with Buddy Heild, it's really just threes. You know, if you drop him, you'll miss out on the random 6 3-pointer night, but you should be able to find more well-rounded production on the waiver wire. Next up on the list, D'Angelo Russell of the LA Lakers. I was shocked to see that his roster rate is still north of 80% right now in Yahoo leagues. And, he ranks well outside the top 160 over the last month. I will say that rostership is maybe a little bit elevated. LeBron missed a couple of games. Austin Reeves missed a stretch. So, he had the big game against Portland earlier this month, but that has not been the norm by any means. And again, he saw a little bit of an uptick in production when Austin Reeves missed those 4 games. So that was a nice little reprieve, I suppose, if you were holding D'Angelo Russell. But Reeves is back in action now. He's played the last 2 games. Russell has only played 37 total minutes since Reeves returned. Russell's only played 37 total minutes since Austin Reeves returned. And if we look at the last 15 games overall for D'Angelo Russell, we're talking 12 points, 4.5 assists, 3 rebounds, 41% from the field, only 2 made threes per game. He's only seeing 25 minutes in that span. Like most of the players on this list, Russell will still occasionally have the nights where you wish he was on your roster, but on balance, he has not been worth the investment. It's not worth riding that roller coaster. Sometimes he's only playing 17 minutes. You could drop D'Angelo Russell in anything but deeper league. All right, the 5th and final player on our list, we're staying out west, Trayce Jaxson Davis of the Golden State Warriors. And if you're watching this thinking, yeah, I dropped him weeks ago, good. That's what you should have done. But he's still 45% rostered on Yahoo right now. That was another surprising number. And again, hopefully you've done it already, but we're talking about a guy who's given you 7 points and 5 rebounds this season. Like, there really wasn't a 1 or 2 week stretch even. All right, the fifth and final player on our list, we're staying out west, Trayce Jackson Davis of the Golden State Warriors. And he's another guy, when I look at the roster rate, 45%, it seems high. It seems high. Hopefully you've dropped him already. You know, we're talking about a guy who on the season is giving you 7 points and 5 rebounds per game. There really hasn't even been like a 1 or 2 week stretch where he's been on fire, and it makes sense to add him. I get that the minutes were there earlier in the season. That's not really the case anymore. Started to see more Kevon Looney. You know, Trayce Jackson Davis took a DMP CD a couple weeks ago out of nowhere against Minnesota. Even when he is out there, he doesn't block enough shots. He only has 2 games with multiple blocks all season. He's a poor free throw shooter. He doesn't shoot threes. I get there was some level of appeal when it felt like he was a full-time starter earlier in the year, but he's basically played a max of 22 minutes over the last 5 games. And he's somebody that needs big minutes to really be fantasy viable. Warriors are still tinkering their the Warriors are still tinkering with their rotation on a nightly basis. So who knows, maybe a week or 2 from now, he's back in the lineup, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't think there's a ton of fantasy upside here. If you're still holding on to Trayce Jackson Davis, probably time to let him go. Even in deeper formats, I mean, you could find significantly more appealing streaming options every week on the waiver wire.